Howdy, friends. This is Annie Fonte, and you are listening to the Badass Soul-Seeking Warrior podcast. On each episode, I chat with a different guest and ask them to share their stories about what they were doing before they decided to redesign their life, what they're doing now, and how they navigated through the challenges and events in their life to get to where they are today. What realizations and transformations did they experience? What fears did they overcome? And ultimately, how did they create a life that they love? Hello, my friends. I am really excited to introduce you to Dawn Myers. She is my podcast guest today. Dawn has spent 20 years in the hospitality industry, focused primarily on human resources, and then did some consulting on her own before last year. Kind of in the midst of the pandemic, she is the co-founder of a company called Guided Leadership Solutions. Dawn, thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Well, there's a lot of strings we could pull at with this conversation today, but in our pre-conversation, you told me that you, at the age of 36, were diagnosed with depression. And I think that, quote, mental health is a conversation that's kind of been tucked away in the corner for a long time because of the stigma or the discomfort that people had around that. So would you mind spending a little bit of time talking about your personal experience, how you came to find out that you did have depression, and we'll kind of ask questions beyond that when we get to that point.
Absolutely. So from a young age, I can totally remember and even seeing myself being very emotional. Sometimes I'd be, enjoying things, and then all of a sudden I'd be very sad. And I really equated it to, grew up in a very tumultuous home, and really equated it to my fears around that, or things, or people would tell me, Dawn, can you calm it down a little bit? And so I would start to bring all of those feelings inside and close them off and try to push them down. And, but they were always still there, kind of lurking there in the background. And so I thought, well, okay, if I just find the love of my life and get married, I'll be happy. And I did that, and I wasn't. And then it was, well, if I could just have kids, it must be that I need to have kids. And went through years of infertility and figured that was why I was so emotional, so broken. But I hid it from everybody. My own family outside of my husband had no idea. And so I had kids, 2 kids, adopted my firstborn, my secondborn, birthed myself. And I was more sad than ever. And I just couldn't figure this out. What could it be? I had a great career. I had great kids. I had all of these quote unquote things that I thought would make me happy, but I wasn't. And I really struggled with others that really had a life that was really hard, but they were happy. It's like it didn't equate with me, but I just figured this is just me. This is the way that I am. And I just kept going and going and getting more and more burned out, more and more. It's kind of the way I kind of look at it is you can only contain a poison for so long before it's going to corrode the exterior and start to spill out. And that's what happened with me. It started to spill out, and I would have arguments with my husband all the time, or at work I would come undone, and then I'd have to go in my office, and I really got to the place where I was literally in the fetal position in my office on the floor, just crying, and then I'd pull myself back up and pull myself up and go out and just take care of as much as I could and go back. And I would, on the weekends and at night, I would just have to go to bed. And my husband was so amazing. I don't know why, I told him, I don't know why you didn't leave me, but thank goodness he saw something there that was worth working through. And one day I got out of bed, I made breakfast for my boys, and then I got right back in bed. And my oldest, Ricky, he was probably about 7 or 8. He came in and he put his little face on my face and he said, "Do you think you could try again, Mom?" And it was just this watershed moment for me of, oh my goodness, what am I doing to my kids? I'm doing to my kids what my dad did to us, but he was an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm doing the same thing, but in a different way. I have to get help. And that was the first time. And so I spoke to a friend and she said, you need to get in to see a psychiatrist. And of course, that was overwhelming. A psychiatrist, I don't think so. I don't think it's a psychiatrist, but I did. I did. And I was diagnosed with dysthymia, which is lifelong depression. It's the kind that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain from birth. It's genetic. And started to really work on myself. And the amazing thing is opening up to my family, going through the journey and being very open about it. 3 of my sisters and my dad all got help as well. And my dad, for the most part, quit drinking. He was self-medicating. And don't we all do that? It's food or alcohol or work. I find I can be a real workaholic and throw myself into work so I don't have to think about things.
Sure.
So I'm a big proponent for talking about it because in the beginning I was so ashamed. I grew up in the church and, I would hear messages in church, just come to the altar and leave it with Jesus. And I would do that and yet still feel the same.
Right.
And I believe God created doctors and people to help us when we're struggling. And they're right there in front of us, but sometimes we're ignoring them because we're looking for the great miracle when it's right in front of us.
So true. And so much of this is valuable. And I think it's useful for us to have this back and forth because there's folks out there listening that probably have felt the same things at some point in their life. So if we can back this up, at what age, how early in your life did you start to recognize that you had this sadness that would kind of put you in a mode of wanting to go to bed and stay in bed, or you were happy in one moment and then in the next moment you were sad? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think I can remember as early as 3 years old.
Okay.
There's a lot I don't remember from my childhood. I do tend to remember the more emotional moments.
Right.
And so it kind of makes me feel bad because I don't remember a lot of the happy ones. And I think part of that was I was a little bit numb through the happy times.
And for the sake of older people, parents, most definitely, or people who work around young kids, maybe it's teachers in some capacity or guardians of some sort, are there specific signs one can look at to think maybe we should get some help for this person?
Yeah, definitely. The first sign is them pulling away or not being fully present. And so for us as parents, then we have to be fully present in order to recognize that, right? We have to be looking for the signs. And that's something that I've really been cognitive of with my boys, because very interestingly enough, it's not the child that I birthed that suffers from depression, but it's my son that I didn't birth that really suffers from it. And it was really interesting to me that I've been able to help him in a way that he helped me by being that catalyst for that watershed moment. But I think that sometimes we see things as parents and we think they're phases. We think, oh, okay, they're just a little withdrawn. That's typical. We want to tell ourselves the things that kind of make us feel better rather than digging a little deeper and talking about those emotions, talking about, especially now with so much social media and things that just can exacerbate what may already be there. A lot of parents see it as laziness because they aren't motivated, kids aren't motivated to get their homework done or to do certain things, because there's no motivation. There's such a lack of motivation, and there's extreme tiredness that comes along with it. I mean, I know I've been tired all my life, and now I know what it comes from, and I can say, no, we're just going to push past that. But as a child, I didn't understand that. I didn't know that.
So when you were diagnosed with dysthymia, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was that done through a blood test? Was that done through a battery of other sorts of tests? How did they define it down to
Right.
dysthymia?
I didn't believe it at first either because there was no blood test for it. There was intense conversations with the psychiatrist and a therapist, and that's what they came back with. And I believe that it was due to hearing about my dad and kind of the childhood that I had, and hearing about family members and those kinds of things, that the genetic piece came into play. But I never had blood work done or anything like that. And I was kind of like, I'm sharing this with my family. I'm saying, this is what I have, but supposedly it's genetic, because I really didn't totally believe it. And I just figured it was something wrong with me. So when my sister went and asked to be put on antidepressants or to be seen and go through, because it's not just medication, it's just a small assist. You've really got to change your whole life.
Yes.
And but when that happened, I saw a complete dynamic change in my family. And I was like, well, wow, this is genetic. And I can go back to my dad's dad, who wasn't close to him at all, but I never understood his behaviors. And I believe those come from where he was hurting inside. He just couldn't, he didn't know what to do with those feelings. And when we aren't open about it, when we can't speak about it, then it gets shut down and it becomes an enemy.
Sure. I think that's especially true probably for men.
Yes.
And kids, because kids don't have the resources to identify what's going on with them.
Right.
So to be clear, is there a blood test one can be given to see if they do have somewhere on the spectrum of depression or mental illness when it comes to depression?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I never dug into it deep enough. I just knew what it had done for us as a family. I'm sure there's hormonal pieces that play into it, especially for women, that play into it. But I would think that there must be, but I really don't know.
Okay. And so there's genetics that have a part that they play in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also folks that don't have a genetic lineage of the challenge that can find themselves in a depressed state of mind. What are some of the things that you've learned you can do in addition to medication if you need it? Maybe not all people
Maybe
need
you
it
don't.
all the time, or they may need it for a bit and then they get themselves back on their feet. But what are some of the things you can do exercise wise, food wise, environment wise, as far as your home environment, the people you surround yourself with, those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I really had to do a full inventory of everything in my life. And I had to learn to make time for myself, first of all, because I was in that ignore mode, right? I was in that, let's just keep working, because it's for some reason I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to gain acceptance because I didn't feel that I received that acceptance as a child. Whether it was there or not, I couldn't see it.
Right.
So I kept trying to gain that through the work that I did because it was something I was good at. So I would get praise for it. So I'd want to do more to get that feeling because I was looking for that feeling. So what I really ended up doing was part of it was exercise, making time, and it doesn't have to be vigorous exercise. I know for a while I did half marathons. It was on a triple dog dare from somebody. I said, I want one of your medals. And she's like, no, you're going to have to earn it. So, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, how? And so I trained with her and started running half marathons. And that was very therapeutic for me. When my sister was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer, I stopped running altogether. It just kind of bolted me to a stop and needing to care for her. I never went back to running, and I really miss that. But now I walk a lot and just make sure that I'm out in nature, out in just breathing in and getting in a different environment really helps. And I think that's true for kids too.
Sure.
Sometimes kids will act out if they're depressed. So they're showing anger, right? And that can be a part of depression. And sometimes it's getting them out of that environment.
Right.
I know that things that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed, put ice on your face, ice packs on your face, and 30 seconds, then take them off. 30 seconds, then take them off, because that changes your whole perspective. Like you're focused on the cold there. Deep breathing, really being mindful and having deep breathing. A good diet, I think, is really important. What I would do, which was completely wrong, and I've finally learned at 56, takes a while, is that I was either starving myself to get to a certain size, or I was just eating everything because I knew the next diet was coming around the corner. Right. So I've really found balance in that, so that I don't feel guilty or I don't feel deprived. It's such a mental thing. Your mind is so powerful. And that's the biggest thing, is I really learned cognitive behavioral therapy. And really what that is telling yourself the truth, whether you believe it or not. Right. And so automatically my brain wakes up to, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to get up. I can't face the day. And what I had to learn to do was, you can do this. Get up. It's going to be a good day. Did I believe it? Not a word of it. But I replaced those tapes in my head. And so now, years later, that automatically kicks in. The moment I open my eyes and go, and then it's like, oh, wait, I've trained my brain to think differently. And I think this is what happens with young kids too, is especially when they get to the teenage years, their minds are being filled with all that negativity. Mm-hmm. All of those things that are just bringing them down, and they start believing them, and then they start telling them themselves that. And that our thoughts produce feelings, and our feelings produce thoughts, and then those thoughts produce actions. And that's something I learned so powerful. And I think that it's something that needs to be talked of more, because people think, oh, you're just faking it. No, I faked it for 36 years. Now my inside matches the outside, which is such a huge relief.
Well, and since you've been involved in human resources for so many years, that's really your foundation of expertise. I'm curious, because you were in that profession and in the people understanding business before, not too much before, but before cell phones came around, and iPads and iPods and laptops and Facebook, and I think back in the day it was MySpace, etc. Right. Do you have an understanding of the effects of all that screen time, especially on kids, but kids and adults, and how that can enhance those feelings of sadness or uncertainty or unworthiness because of what's they're placing themselves in front of and what's being placed in front of them? Because the people who invented this stuff, they know. Right. Dopamine's a big thing. Right. And that those dopamine hits are why people get so addicted to it. But how, as far as your understanding goes, how does that affect someone from a mental health standpoint?
I think it's huge. And I think that's another thing parents can really look out for is, and I know that there are some parents that don't, and I was this type of parent. I don't want to be the police. I don't want to be the parent police, but I also would do some things a little bit differently, even though, my kids didn't get their phones until high school. They look at, my nieces and nephews and they're like, what are you talking about? You need a phone at 10, they're like, that's ridiculous. So I was a little bit more fortunate in that, but I've seen it with my nieces and my nephews, and not just the social media. For the girls, especially, I think the social media is the biggest detriment. We see all these pictures of people and we start thinking that we're not good enough. My sister and I were talking about this. She did it first, and I have followed suit. Replaced our pictures of on social media with we're following people that are like us, that have a message that's positive and they want to get out there. B, they don't have a great body. They don't have it all put together. They don't pretend to have it all put together. They let themselves be seen without makeup, those kind of things. Because for a while you start to look at all the media and you're just like, especially as you age, and I'm sure as teenagers, when they're trying to, impress boys, there's that feeling of, I'm never going to get there. And then there's that, it just weighs on you. I think for boys, the really dangerous thing, and I was very fortunate my boys didn't get too far into this, but are the video games.
Yes.
And not only are there video games that are so negative and speak such negative messages, but then they're on headsets with other people that are telling each other those things. And
right.
all of those thoughts that are being put into their brains are creating feelings. And it's no wonder, I don't know, it's no wonder we have a drug crisis.
Yes.
Because people just want to get away from the pain. And I remember that. I remember not wanting to live. I couldn't have killed myself because of my family, but that's the only reason I survived, was the guilt over that.
Yeah, and I've done a significant amount of research on the effects of a young person's brain. Mm-hmm. When they spend so much time in front of a screen, it actually truncates other parts of their brain from growing. And it's definitely the social side that gets cut off from development, which is so important because most people want to be in community. They want to be around others, and that's been substituted with this screen that has all this, I call it fake news for the most part. Right. Now there's accounts or folks like you've determined you're going to follow that are authentic. And I think that's one thing we all could ask ourselves, am I really an expression of my true essence? Or am I putting out into the world this masked character that has nothing to do with who I truly am and what I really feel like on the inside? And then once again, that's just a bomb waiting to go off, because you can only express externally happipiness and joy and fun and all those things for so long until the incongruency between what's going on the inside, what you're expressing on the outside, something's got to give.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think too, it's important for us, we've become such an exterior focused society. And I think that's to the detriment of the development and the muscle and the importance of the interior. Mm-hmm. This is truly an inside job.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I think too, in your particular situation, because there were genetic components to this for you, and then you visually witnessed these things in your environment. Your father drank, your siblings had some form of this depression, it sounds like. So you were really looking for a life raft of some sort to help save you, and you're in the middle of this ocean just trying to keep your head above water. And you didn't have the people around you or the resources that were capable of even recognizing you might have a challenge to begin with, so they could throw you that lifeline that you so desperately wanted. And you were at an age where you started to determine, and I think kids do this, I get kudos if. And that means I'm a good girl, I'm a hard worker, I bring home A's. I'm making this up right now. I don't know if this is in your case or not. I'm a hard worker and I get awards at school or in my job. And so I'm going to keep doing those things, even though that feels so out of alignment. Does that ring a bell with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, it was mostly in work. I started working when I was probably 13, babysitting, but then I would get kudos for that. You did such a good job. Oh, you cleaned my house too? Oh my goodness. Things I probably would never do at home. Because I didn't have the energy, but I took all my energy and put it into that because I knew I would get, it was for me. I wasn't doing it, I realize now, for them. I was doing it to get
for yourself,
to get the kudos. And I did that for so many years in business. Wasn't doing these selfless acts. I was doing it because I wanted to know, in a sense, whoever loves Dawn, raise your hand. Do you accept me? Do you think this is a good idea? If you don't think it's a good idea, I'm going to edge it to something a little bit differently. And it probably wasn't until I was about 40, after I had gone through, and I think most people who go through depression have this, if they are put on medication, you really resist it because you feel like you should be able to kick this. You should be able. And so I went on and off medication for quite a long time. And finally, a friend said, if you were diabetic and you needed injections to balance your insulin levels, would you refuse to do it? No. And then he didn't have to say anymore. Right. It was like, oh, I get it.
Right.
And I just had to surrender,
Sure.
Surrender to the process of what I needed to do to be a whole person. And I'm so thankful that I did.
Yes.
Because I think there are many that are still battling that battle of, I should be able to do this on my own if it has medication, or I shouldn't feel this way. I think don't shit on yourself.
Right.
Feel that way. It's okay. And I think that's why I want to speak about it so much. I would speak about it in new hire orientation, and I teach at San Diego State, and I speak about it in every class when I introduce myself and talk about it, because we all have these masks that we wear.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny may be showing up late and not being as productive as he could be. And so what do? We put Johnny down because he's not living up to our expectations as leaders or even coworkers. But is anybody going and saying, Johnny, are you okay?
Right.
What's behind that lack of productivity? And I believe that was where a lot of my success came from, in just coming and saying, okay, what's really going on?
Mm-hmm.
I equated it to, if you're running around with your shoes untied, I'm going to call you in and I'm going to say, first of all, do you know your shoes are untied? Second of all, do you know how to tie your shoes?
Right.
Some people just don't even know what's going on.
Right.
And then let me help you. Let me help you learn and grow.
And I think that's so important. And the entire globe experienced together this thing called COVID going on 2 years ago now. And I think that was the big reveal. I call it the big reveal. But because it showed us as individuals, as corporations, as families, as a planet, as a society, as a culture, where we had dysfunction in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I think it was particularly eye-opening for folks who had that happy face. They were putting on this happy face and they were managing to, stay afloat, but really they were just hanging on by a thread. And I know there's been a lot of studies done. I've been doing a lot of research on this. There was a global study done on employers and employees, and it says that 78% of the workers say the pandemic negatively affected their mental health. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And 76% of those employees believe that the companies they work for or work with should do more to address this mental health challenge that we're talking about. And 83% of the employees would like their employers to put some sort of assistance in place, especially technology-driven assistance. Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings us into all these years you've spent in human resources. You, during the pandemic, or on the back end of it, it sounds like, you co-founded a company called Guided Leadership Solutions. So can you speak about what your company does, but also how you think the pandemic really had mental health challenges bubble to the surface and people had to kind of embrace them and start to do something about them because they're forced to?
Right. I'll address the second part first there. What the pandemic did was cause people to stop, slow down, and then have to look within.
Right.
Whereas when you're going to work and you're just putting that face on, you can put that face on, you come home, but you're so tired, you're just going to go to bed and you're going to try to you'll get up tomorrow and you'll try again. And being at home, not getting the kudos that were giving you those shots, and then faced to be at home with no help, no real help, right? If you have a supportive family, that's great. I had a supportive family, but sometimes it's just not enough. There are more tools, more things that need to be addressed that you just can't do in a family setting. And some things you don't even want to talk about. I know I did not journal on purpose because I didn't want anybody to find my journal.
Yes.
And to see what it really looked like inside. Now I can talk about it but I'm in a different place. I'm not that person anymore. So I think that has really been a big thing. I think that has caused a lot of the Great Resignation. What I talk to companies about, and I'll get into how we started our company, but what I talk to companies about is CYA squared. And I've been talking about this for years and years, but it's the side. California is very, very employee friendly as far as laws go. So employers get scared and they're very worried and they want to be sure they're doing the cover your ass on one side.
Right.
But on the other side, there's the care for your associates. And what I find that companies do is they swing the pendulum too far one way or the other. They're either on that total legal compliance side, which sure as we're sitting here today, we're breaking a California employment law. Someone can find it if they get mad and go to a lawyer. Yes. Trust me, I've seen it. But the other side is the care for your associates. And some of what companies have done is like, oh, well, we'll just put a ping pong table in there. Or we'll do something.
That's a cure-all.
Yeah, right. We'll have a potluck. It'll be great. But there's that underlying that it has to be authentic. It has to be, you have to be able to create a psychologically safe place to work. And I think that when you swing that pendulum over to the care for your associates side, I've even seen employers, I'm going to put the down payment on your apartment because you're struggling. Well, that's going to come back and burn you at some point. And I've seen it happen. So there has to be that sweet spot, which to me is CYA squared. You find that place where you're creating compliance and you are creating psychological safety for your employees. And the Great Resignation showed us that employees want to be seen, to be heard, and to be cared for. And if they're not, they have other options. I found that myself. I had gone to a company and was doing consulting with a company, and it was not a psychologically safe place. And there were so many demands and it was so counter to who I was starting to really burn out and come undone myself. And I knew I needed to do something different, but I loved the consulting part and I loved the impact that I could have with the companies that I worked with. And that's when my partner, she had reached out to me and said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And she shared her idea, which is very different from where we ended up. But the premise was the same. We want to help companies. We want to help San Diego small businesses succeed and grow. And so that's what we're doing right now. We do have, we're looking and niching into the legal field as far as working with law firms. And that's really been just very organic. We've gotten hooked up with some law firms and really see the potential in helping so many people through helping the lawyers, and particularly family laws is what we've been working with. But of course, we're always open to anything. But in helping them, then it can trickle out and help with, adoptions, can help with mediating difficult separations, those kinds of things. And just one thing that I've seen is that lawyers and law professionals are very driven, and there usually is a lot underneath that as well. So I love being able to have that personal side to be able to strengthen that foundation, because at some point, if the leadership foundation is not strong, then it will collapse, and it affects so many other people.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, with all the years you spent in this business, what have you noticed to be the common threads of a toxic culture or toxic work environment versus one that's healthy?
Ego.
Okay.
The ego of the leadership in many times gets in the way. And I think that fear as well.
Mhm.
And when people fear something, they run right towards it. Because you're telling yourself, I'm afraid. And, rather than doing that cognitive behavioral therapy and saying, I'm safe, I can do this. This is good.
Mhm.
And so I think especially those that are in leadership positions, there's a lot, they think they know the best way that it needs to be. And, I just did a training with my partner with a large mastermind group, and it was on who's really running your business. The employees are running your business, and yet we're not investing in them. We're not taking care of them. We're not making sure that they have the tools and the resources to do the job that you're really asking them to do. And then when they make a mistake, we hit them over the head.
Right.
Rather than use that as a teachable moment and say, okay, I see, I don't want to be Monday morning quarterback. I get you made that decision, but let's look at it from a different angle and give the why behind. But that takes time.
Yes.
And that takes relationship. And some people aren't comfortable with that.
Right. How do you define leadership?
I think it's with authenticity and courage. So you have to be authentic. I think transparency has to come in there. So when I believe when you're authentic, you're transparent. So, but you have to have the courage to speak up when something's not right. The courage to dig in a little bit deeper with your employees, knowing you might be taking a little bit of a risk, but you're doing it out of care. And I tell leaders all the time, if you're so worried about being sued, you might as well get sued for caring than not caring. So, and again, I'm a firm believer when you marry culture and compliance, it's the best you can do. It really is the best you can do, because you're creating the compliance side is creating the boundaries for employees, which we all want. Mm-hmm. Everyone's looking for those boundaries. And then the caring side just adds to that. It's the icing on the cake.
Yeah, and I think all of that in healthy cultural environments and corporations, whether it's an entrepreneurially driven company or it's multifaceted and departmental and different wings and all this, that the bottom line is you have to be trustworthy and trusted by the people that you're asking to be on your team. Otherwise, boat's gonna sink.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to be mentored under a general manager, Jim Durbin, for probably 13 years. And his leadership team, executive team, he wouldn't call it an executive team, which I loved. And we were all partners. And he gave us, when he first started with us, he gave us all a black marble and a white marble. And he said, when you give a white marble, that means you're in agreement with what we're talking about. But if you give a black marble, you're disagreeing, and you can black marble at any time. When you knew you carried that weight, that real weight of that, you didn't black marble. And black marble, for the most part, was if someone needed to go, if something was, these were really big decisions. You rarely took that black marble out because you knew it was on you, and you're affecting people's lives and those kind of things. And he really taught me so much about how to have that balance there.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast this weekend, and it was Rich Roll, who's a great podcaster, and he had the fellow, Jason's his name, that has broken the world record on rowing across the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
And that's a boat, a 30-foot boat with 4 people on it. And so they rowed 2 hours on, 2 hours off. But he was talking about how he got into rowing and his passion for it. And when he was on the rowing team at Vespar, which is in Philadelphia, which is one of the most well-known rowing boat houses there is, they would have these seat rows, because on a boat that you rowed typically down the Cambridge River, if you will, the number 8 seat is like the quarterback of the boat. That's the seat that you want to strive for, because you've made it, and that's the important place on the boat. And he said they would have these seat rows all the time, and this one guy always won. regardless, they would row, and then they'd put a whole different team in with this one guy, and he was the common thread. And anytime he was in the boat, that boat won. And they asked him, this fellow, what is it about you? What is it about your rowing? Why are you so good? Why can no one beat you? And he says, I don't do anything. I don't row harder than anybody. He says, but what I do is if somebody needs more row time, I stay after and row with them. If the boats need cleaned, I'm the one after cleaning the boats. If someone's having a rough day, I'm the one walking around the boathouse with them and just talking things through and listening to them. If someone's not feeling well, I'm the one who's going to show up with chicken soup or whatnot. So the rest of the team, through observation of this person's actions, so respected him that anytime they jumped in a boat with him, they worked harder. He didn't have to do anything but be that supportive, genuine, authentic guy that he was. And I thought that was such a beautiful metaphor for leadership in corporations, or leadership in any size company, really.
Yeah. And I think what happens too much is something happens with an employee, especially smaller companies, and then the owner gets so involved in correcting that they end up working in the business, right? Instead of supporting everyone else, like what you're talking about, and building that trust and that respect. And that just doesn't come overnight. Like this gentleman, he would stay after, he would bring soup. It was part of who he was. Right. And exactly. People knew that. And I think that's why the authenticity is so important, because employees have a BS monitor like no one's business. And so if someone's just blowing smoke, they know it. They may follow because they have to, but not out of that respect and want to work hard for. And that's, I think, part of what has helped me along the way is I've had such great teams that have worked so hard for me, but they also knew that I was willing to clean up the throw up that happened in the lobby. And I was willing to clean the rooms or be at the front desk and get to know the people for who they were, not for what they could do.
Right.
And when an employee would come to me and they'd say, I'm really frustrated because it seems like, Joey is getting all the attention and, he got a better performance evaluation than I did or whatever. And it's like, hey, don't worry about Joey. You worry about you, because I hired you for you and no one else can be you. So as long as you're doing your best, that's all I can ask for. That's all I want.
Yeah.
And that would open the door for someone to, instead of be focusing on the negative and attention other people were getting, to just being, oh, I don't have to worry about my job. I mean, I can just be who I am in my job.
Yeah. Stay in your lane and do a good job. And as long as everybody else stays in their lane, we're going to get somewhere.
Right.
I like what you said about the employees have a big BS monitor. And I thought BS meant something else, but I now find out from you it means blowing smoke. So I love it. I never thought about that before. Dawn, talk to us about guided leadership solutions. What do you kind of umbrella summarize what you do, but how do you help these? You've now kind of narrowed it down to law practices right now, but how do you help these companies you work with? What type of services do you offer? Why do they come to you? If there's people listening and that may be facing some challenges within their own organizations, what can you offer to people to help their organization run smoothly and really to help them maximize their bottom lines?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing that we do is we get in and get to know a business. So we have a strategy package, and it's not just a meeting where we go through, which we do. We have a meeting. We're going to pull everything out of that business owner's brain, spark different conversations to see where things are at. Where are you at now? Where do you want to be? Who are your ABC players? What do you need to start? What do you need to stop? What do you need to continue? Just getting all of those things to spark different questions and conversations, and then getting into the business itself, talking to their key stakeholders and going through looking for compliance, being sure, because we want to marry that culture and compliance. So we want to find out about the culture. We want to find out about compliance. And then we put together an action plan. that's very easy to follow in order of importance. Like, here's your red flags right here, okay? And here's your yellow, and here's your green. If you don't ever get to these, that's okay, but it would be great if you did. And so we give them that action plan for them to follow. For some, they want to take that and they want to run with it. What we found is they want to run with it until something pops up in their business. And then they don't have time to run with it. So many times what happens, and what we offer as well, is we have a what we call the guided leadership solutions journey. And it starts with the foundation. It starts with building that. What's your mission? What are your core values? What are the critical actions that you're looking for from your employees and from yourself? And then starting there and going from there to hiring and onboarding and employee development, performance management, all of those things, all the way through to separation. So that, and we're looking at it from the culture again and the compliance side. And once someone is finished with 6 months or 12 months, just depending on what's there, they've got a solid, not just foundation and the coaching, but they also have all the tools that they need to do that. Their application, their job descriptions, their offer letters, their performance management documents, one-on-one documents, training materials, all those things, they're all there in this arsenal for them, and they've been walked through how to use them. And usually it's with their key stakeholders so that they're not having to do it all themselves. Some do, but most, if we can work with a strong coordinator or an HR person to really, and usually it's companies that are growing too. So there's that growth, and there's that, I know I need something, but I don't know. And you're going to break if you don't do something. And that's really where we come in and kind of give them a little bit of peace of mind while allowing them to really grow into their best selves. And so personally and professionally.
Yeah. So metaphorically speaking, you can hand them the cookbook with all the recipes and how to make all these things you've discovered about their company and do that. Or you can get in the kitchen with them and cook up whatever the recipe is that needs to, from an implementation standpoint, needs to happen. And then I'm guessing that you can check in on a quarterly basis or monthly basis and help whoever's been charged with kind of fulfilling the strategic plan that you've handed to them. So you have a lot of different ways you can get people to their end goal. And then once they get there, they may reset
to
something else.
Right. Who knows? Yeah. It just allows them to see the opportunities rather than to feel the weight.
And to bring us full circle back to our conversation when we started this chat about mental health, how often is there a mental health component in the diagnostics of seeing where a company needs to start and stop doing things and implement certain processes in their organization?
Yeah, I think that the health of the organization is dependent on the health of those running the organization. So it's not an outward component where we're going to say, okay, let's talk about your mental health. Right. But as we get to know these leaders and work with them, or owners and work with them, we start to see, it's very easy for me to pick up on the little signs of things. It might be control. It may be ignoring things that are falling through the cracks, or ignoring behaviors in other people because you just don't have what it takes to emotionally to deal with it, or you're afraid you might get mad, or you might, so part of the beauty of what we're able to do is really coach people through those things. And I think because I'm so transparent about my own journey, it opens the door for conversation. It's not something that's put on somebody, but it's something that kind of just opens up very naturally.
Can you give us an example? Certainly don't want you to disclose anything that you can't, but can you give us an example of growth or evolution that you've experienced when working with any of these clients that you've had that you just went, wow, they really jumped in. They did the things we asked them to do. They stood shoulder to shoulder with us and they went from X to Y. Do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, we've got a business right now, and actually they have two companies, and this is not a law firm. This is a different type of business. They have two companies, and both companies are growing. And once we got in there and we're looking at everything with their business, we realized that one business had strengths in one way, the other business had strengths in the other way, and yet so each business was floundering in a certain way. And what we did in our strategy time with the owner was, we really believe that you're wasting some great talent, and that you can do some shared services here with, as far as leadership goes. Mm-hmm. So it'll take a lot off of your plate, because he was meeting with this leadership team over here and then this leadership team over here. So, when we talked to him about it, he was just blown away. He was so excited. And now we're putting the plan in place to have one leadership team over both companies, and then they each have their own, basically, division. On the outside, it looks like two separate companies, but on the inside, there's going to be one operations manager, one office manager, one HR generalist, and instead of one sales and marketing, and instead of just having to piece it together.
Right. Got it. That has to make the efficiencies so much nicer to embrace, and it gives people some breathing room, and it gives them some clarity that they probably had been missing in the past.
Mm-hmm. And it's so funny, because it seems like coming in, and I think this is when you're working within your own superpower, is what I call it, is, someone else who's in their business, their superpower is the actual business, what they do. It isn't always to be able to step back and look at organizational development, or to look at that culture and compliance, and that's, I believe that HR leaders are really going to have to focus on those kinds of things in order to gain employees back, mm-hmm. or get new employees in, so that they can attract them as well. And so just in that very simple thing that just seemed like this was a no-brainer for my partner and I, like this is what needs to happen. Then you're kind of tiptoeing in, hoping, are they going to see it the way that you're seeing it? And to see him say, yes, that's it. And to be able to start making those pieces move it's been really exciting. And it's what we love.
Yeah, I can tell. And I think too, it's been my experience, because I've done consulting and I own my own companies and I'm the chief executive, chief operating officer. It's a whole heck of a lot easier for me to walk into another organization and see where they have opportunities for improvement than for me to walk into my two doors every day and see where I have opportunities for improvement, right?
Right. No, I tell you, my partner, Robin, and I, we talk about this all the time. We're like, we figure this out for people every day. How come we can't figure this out for ourselves? We all need help.
Exactly. So I always like to leave our listeners with some tips or some strategies that are useful for them and that are implementable right away. So let's talk on the personal side and then on the business side. So on the personal side, what are some self-care tips you can give folks? And also on the corporate side or the business side, what are some self-care tips you can give leadership in those settings that will enhance the way they do business, or enhance the way that they look at their employees and change their perspective on some things that would be beneficial across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the personal side, it's very important to make time for yourself first. And it's counterintuitive, because we just think that's selfish. When I was in therapy, my therapist told me I was selfish, and I was like, oh, I was so, and the definition of selfish was that I put myself into everything. My boss would call me into his office and I'd be like, oh crud, what did I do? You know, someone gave me a look, I'd like, oh, what did I do wrong? That is that true definition of selfish. Self-care is putting yourself first so that you're better for others. So it has to be scheduled first, or it'll just get bumped out every single time. So I try to really carve that out. And it's hard for me to do, because I want to take that client meeting at that time, but you need to protect those times for yourself. In the professional setting, and I wish I would have known this earlier, I would either get a business coach or an executive coach, or be in a mastermind of some sort of community that you can be in, so that you're not alone, especially when you're in those leadership roles. There are so many times you really don't have, I know for me in HR, I didn't have anybody to talk to, right? It was me and then the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could go to the general manager, but then you're constantly going in and going, oh, letting out all your stuff, trying to figure things out. And I really wish that I would have realized the need for that. And I did have that, and what we had was the Hospitality Human Resources Association, but it wasn't as much a mastermind where you're really getting into the deep, you're having a round table and you're getting into the deep issues, or you're meeting one-on-one and have a mentor that's really going to draw out of you those things that you just can't draw out of yourself.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes, it's been my experience at least, the resources that I select for that, for me, it's important that they be value-based and experience-based individuals, because there's a lot of people out there that call themselves a consultant. And I'm not putting down the profession, and I'm not putting down anybody in particular, but if you're in consulting and you've never done the thing you're asking other people to do, it's hard when you're sitting on the being asked of side to have a lot of trust in, okay, you're telling us that this is what we need to do, but you've never actually done this. So it's a little questionable maybe. So I think finding a good fit for yourself from a coaching or mentoring or mastermind setting is important. And I love masterminds. I am involved in them, and I really do get a lot from them, but they're with people who are in the thick of it, like I am. They're in it day in and day out. And when we step out into this mastermind, we can listen to each other, and we have a less involved perspective because we're not knee deep in it. Right. And that's helpful. And then they're knee deep in something else, but I'm talking about, I'm up to here, up to my neck in this particular thing. And they have some of the most brilliant perspectives sometimes, because they're not emotionally attached to it. They're not financially attached to it. They're just a good-hearted person who's really smart, that can see things I can't see for myself because I'm too submerged in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another key there is, if you get involved in a group and it doesn't fit for you, speak up. Yeah. Don't waste your time. Don't wait. Even if you can't get your money back, don't waste your time. Right. Because time is valuable. But sometimes we're like, but I paid for it, so I'm gonna go through the whole thing. I'm gonna be miserable the whole time, but I'm gonna get my money's worth. Well, what have you really done? Right. In that?
I agree 100%. Well, here's what I'm going to do for our listeners, Dawn. I'm going to put your website in the show notes, as well as any social media outlets that you'd like people to contact you. I know you do LinkedIn. We can put your LinkedIn information in there as well. Is there anything else you would like to leave our listeners with today on any topic we've discussed?
I just think, know you're not alone. I think so many times we feel we're the only ones that are going through this, and no one could possibly understand. And it's not true. There's so many people that are going through the same exact things that we're going through, and we just need to find our people.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's so true, because sometimes you might hear something about a person or a situation, and from the outside looking in, you would have never imagined that. So things aren't always what they appear to be. And we have to know that, yeah, we're all human beings. We all have our good days and our not so good days. We, put our pants on generally the same way, maybe walking with the right versus the left leg, but got to put your pants
Absolutely.
on. So, well, Don, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for this
Thank
discussion.
you.
I think we've had a lot of valuable things that our listeners can take back to their individual lives or to their companies or to even their families and benefit from. So I appreciate the time that you spent today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You take good care.
You too.